Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. And today's video is about a motorcycle which frankly I'd forgotten about, and I'm sure lots of other people have forgotten about it as well, which had a rather poor reputation in the motorcycle press. And we're going to start off with a look at a road test from Bike magazine in August 1974. Now it says something about a bike road test when the byline to the article states that the tester discovered Soviet biking but wished that he hadn't. And in the opening line of the article declared that if you've got any sort of hankering at all to be a motorcyclist, then don't bother reading this test. So a rather poor start to all of it. And the subject of this rather blunt appraisal was the Voskhod 175 twin port two-stroke, and a test was conducted by Martin Harrison, and his relationship with the bike got off to a very bad start when its lack of braking power very nearly finished him off full stop. So useless, in fact, was the brake that he tested it later when it took 180 feet to haul the bike down from 30 miles an hour, which is staggering. I think putting your feet down would probably have resulted in a shorter braking distance. Other failings he noticed were that the frame was clearly out of line, so the wheels were 1.5 inches out front to back, which is again quite staggering. The tyres apparently gripped as well as the brakes worked, i.e. not at all, and the indicators only flashed legally once the bike was travelling over 40 miles an hour, which, given it didn't do much more than that flat out, pretty much rendered them useless. The engine was described as crude and leaky, and the brand new bike, which they had sealant around the exhaust ports to try and stop them blowing more two-stroke oil and mist out, which is pretty poor. Added to that, he complained about cheap plastic switches and a centre stand which was utterly useless. The conclusion to the article stated that you really had to ride this thing to understand why the test had been so negative, and concluded with the quote, "Anything like the Voskhod is a killer. I hope to God I never see one on the road," which is probably the most damning conclusion I ever read on any motorcycle in any magazine. Now, Bike did have a bit of a reputation for being critical on an amusing level. They were always quite good at that. And luckily there's another test we can check to see whether the bike was quite as bad as it was being made out. And this time it was in Motorcycle Sport in December 1974, so only 4 months on. And that magazine at that time particularly had a much more staid reputation, a reputation for more serious analysis and more serious-minded readership. Now, it was the same motorcycle, ULP 45M, that Bike had tested, which by the way is no longer on the DVL database, so presumably scrapped long ago. And they started the test by describing the long list of equipment that came as standard, which included a chrome rear carrier, which they said was liable to sever your fingers if you tried pulling the bike onto the centre stand with it. The stand was also criticised for making the bike feel twice as heavy as it actually was. The indicators again get mentioned. Once again they say they're incapable of operating at a legal speed. The engine was slow, obviously described as an ecological disaster at higher speeds. The throttle was sloppy. The bike couldn't hold a steady tick over, so constant blipping of the throttle was required as you sat in traffic or stationary. The braking situation was slightly more interesting because the importers told this magazine that the original front drum and linings from Russia had been dumped and British units had been substituted. And they went on to describe the front brake as being quite good. But if you look at the pictures, and I don't know how well they'll show up because they're not great, but looking at the pictures closely, The brakes look identical to the ones that were pictured in Bike Magazine, which doesn't make you think the drum had been changed at all. Maybe the linings were changed, who knows. But either way, Motorcycle Sport seemed to think the braking had been addressed to some degree. Their whole review was generally less critical, but they still came up with yet more issues, such as poorly spaced gears, a useless mirror, chrome that was flaking off on a brand new bike, a decompressor which was leaking two-stroke oil, which again Bike Magazine had noticed, and a speedo only marked in kilometres per hour. And then the final issue wasn't actually with this particular bike, but with a second one that the importers had brought along with them, fitted with better tyres to show that the bike could actually handle quite well with decent tyres on it. Unfortunately, on that bike, the nut on the swinging arm spindle came undone, the spindle dropped, and the swinging arm locked up the back wheel, and the bike had to be rescued. Now, this incident was gently described with the following quote: "All future machines will use locking nuts on the end of the spindle, so something was gained from the exercise." Which, frankly, is almost unbelievable. If a bike falls apart during a bike test, I personally would have judged that situation rather more harshly than that quote. But anyway, in conclusion, Motorcycle Sport balanced the issues that they'd found, and there were a lot again, against the cost of the bike, and refrained from reaching the same conclusion that Bike Magazine had done. But having read the test closely, I do think the Voskhod came off rather lightly in Motorcycle Sport. But either way, is this the worst bike ever made? From those two tests, possibly, because they're certainly the most damning tests I've ever read of a motorcycle. Did you own one at the time? Did you know anyone who owned one at the time? If you did, please let us know in the comments. Were they really that bad? Let's know. I'd love to find out. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please subscribe and call back to the garage where you'll find more two-wheel and four-wheel nonsense scattered about randomly. Bye for now.